It all happened to my father one stormy night in Glenwood, Colorado. It was the 80s. My father was an electrical engineer who was just returning from a job site. He worked long hours, and it wasn't uncommon for him to be heading home around midnight to the small cabin he shared with a friend tucked back in the canyon walls. It was pouring rain. Lightning flashed only to illuminate the murky, puddled patches of washed-out terrain. My father rounded the corner upon the dirt road. He passed a large willow tree. As his headlights crossed its base, he noticed someone was crouched underneath it. It was a woman who seemed to be in her late 20s with long and tangled blonde hair. She had on a fairly casual clothing and carried a somewhat large bundle in her arms, wrapped in cloth. My father, being the gentleman he was, decided to pull over and offered her to take her to shelter from the storm in his cabin just up the road. She smiled and thanked him as she got into his vehicle. She explained that she had been in a hike through the canyon that day when the storm hit and had been caught off guard by the rain. My dad smiled and pointed out that she wasn't exactly wearing the best clothing or shoes to go on a hike. She laughed and said she had left her place on a whim, unprepared. He asked if she needed him to dry anything at his place, pointing to the bundle she held tightly under her arm. Her voice suddenly got very stern and stated, "No." When my father asked her where she lived around here, things started to get strange. She started telling my dad she had no family or friends in the area, and was quite vague when asked details of where she lived. All she responded with was that it was too far to drive to tonight in this kind of weather. At this point, my dad said he felt she was a bit off, but chalked it up to her exhaustion from hiking and standing out in the storm for several hours. As they entered the cabin, my dad remembered that his roommate had left that morning to take a trip out of town and wouldn't be back for several days. My dad would have offered his friend's room, but didn't feel comfortable doing so without her permission. Remember, this was the 80s. Pocket cell phones weren't on everyone yet. My dad told her she was welcome to sleep on the couch and dry off as he handed her several towels. She took them from him, with her right hand still not letting go of the bundle she held under her arm. My dad at this point realized she had never given her a name, so he introduced himself. "Nice to meet you." She replied, "My name is Mary Lou." My father started to feel a bit more comfortable and turned on the television for her and handed over the remote. She scanned through the channels, finally deciding on a gangster flick. The scene involved a bunch of mobsters getting shot to pieces. Mary found this to be quite amusing and started to laugh in a crackling, high-pitched tone. My dad started to get a bit creeped out by this. She was enjoying it a little too much, he said. Then my dad asked her about her life, and things took a turn for the worse. When asked if she was in a relationship, she pointed at her belt buckle and told my dad the story of her breakup. She claimed her last boyfriend wanted to keep domineering over her, and to this she responded by bludgeoning him half to death in his gravel driveway with her belt buckle. The same one she was wearing. He kept saying, "Stop, please stop," and begging, but I wouldn't show him mercy, she said with a note of pride in her voice. My dad asked if he had abused her or if she was reacting defensively, and she merely scoffed and said no, otherwise he would be dead. My father's unease grew as the conversations progressed. She told him about her mother dying on the operating table and how the surgeon who had been working on her walked out covered in blood, and she said she would be fine. How was she supposed to be okay with all her guts in the trash can? She spewed. Then she laughed again, glancing at the TV screen, littered with disheveled, bullet-riddled corpses. I love the sight of blood. It excites me, turns me on, you know? Death, draining them to death. At this point, my dad was officially done. He was bigger and stronger than she was. He was quite streetwise and had seen plenty of horrors himself, but the way she spoke with a violent confidence, combined with her sure grip on the bundle which lay under her arm, sent chills down his spine. He needed a plan. Finally, an idea popped into my father's head. I have a friend who is a priest in town. He has access to several shelters funded by the church. You would be a lot more comfortable there instead of on our couch. They can feed you too and arrange a ride for you to get home in the morning. I can call him right now. He's only a few miles from here," he stated reassuringly. Mary Lou's tone brightened to match his. "That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much." My father smiled, hiding his relief. "Of course, it's the least I could do for you." As my father walked over to the phone and began to dial the second number, Mary Lou erupted in a low, guttural growl. "I hate priests. I hate priests." She didn't yell. She didn't scream it. She said it with a tired hatred, a clear, direct, audible, whispered disdain from the bottom of her heart, with an unflinching resolve. My dad had enough. This wasn't a game to play anymore. This was beyond a stranger with odd tendencies. Our darkness, with coiled cruelty, had crossed the threshold of his door. "You need to leave, and you need to leave now," my dad said, pointing to the front of the cabin. "There's the door. I can't have you here and feel comfortable. I'm sorry, but the storm has stopped and I hate to have you walk in the dark. But that's the way this has to go. Please leave." Mary Lou gazed upon him, expressionless, and finally just shrugged. My father walked her out, standing close to her in the event that the bundle concealed some type of weapon. He wasn't taking any further chances. She smiled at him as she slowly walked out into the front porch. "Goodbye for now. See you when I see you," she said calmly. With that, she walked down the long dirt road with a single streetlight upon its path. She looked back one last time before crossing the light and disappearing, enveloped by the darkness with no trace of her to be seen. My dad called the police the next day, concerned that she might be hiding on his premises somewhere after speaking to his girlfriend, now my mom, about it, and being convinced by her that she was going to cut the window screen when he was gone, hide in the house, and kill him. They found nothing and said the area attracted a lot of transients and nomads. My father made the mistake of telling his engineer buddies at work, which resulted in them bidding him farewell at the end of each shift, in the form of asking that he say hi to Mary Lou for them. My dad never saw her again. He still questions what could have been in that bundle that she so adamantly protected. Okay, I'm from a small town, and it's one of them towns where everyone knows everyone. I attend a public high school in the center of town and was starting my freshman year. My first day rolled around, and I was making friends, finding classes, the typical first day in high school. When lunch rolled around, I already had a small group of friends, and we had our own table. One of my friends brought this guy over, we'll call him Ryan, and asked if he could sit with us. I didn't want to be rude, so we allowed him, but already I had a weird vibe that something was wrong with this guy. He was a tall, skinny male, about 6 foot at least. He sat beside me and we started talking. I kept ignoring my gut feeling to stay away from Ryan, but I'm not the type to just be rude. After lunch, I went to my locker to gather my books for my last class. And when I shut my locker, there he was, standing down the hall, just watching. I wasn't so creeped out since he was waving bye to me before going to class. After class, the bell rang that it was time to leave, and I had to stay over at school because my bus was always late. As I was waiting, Ryan walked up to me, hugging me very weird, and asked if I wanted to hang out tomorrow with him at his house, since it was the weekend. I wanted to say no, but then my friend came up and said that she wanted to go with me, so we agreed. The next day, we went to his house, and already I was feeling a weird vibe, because his house was away from the main road, and the place looked run down. There was even an old school bus in his yard. Now, why would he need a school bus in his yard? This house almost reminded me of a horror movie, and my thoughts kept coming what was inside the bus in his yard. When we parked, my friend and I noticed him standing on the porch with a huge grin waving us down. He seemed a little too happy to have us there. Looking to my friend, I told her that I wanted to go, but she said she was a close friend and that he was harmless. My friend was with me, so I wasn't too worried, and once we got out of the car, he greeted us and walked into the house. My friend was with me, so I wasn't too worried, and once we got out of the car, he greeted us, and we all walked into the house. The place was dark looking, and on his walls were axes, swords, daggers, handcuffs, even rope. That alone, to me, screamed psycho, but I rubbed it off, and he got us a can of Coke. We all sat in the living room talking. Once my friend excused herself to the bathroom, Ryan moved to sit beside me. Watching intensely, I heard his voice call out, "I really like you. I know you like me from the way you talk to me. We should hook up." Grasping, I noticed he kept inching closer to me as I moved farther away. But just before I could say anything, my friend came back, taking her seat beside me as he got up. Looking to my friend, I whispered into her ear, "We need to leave now. Make an excuse." My friend looked confused, but I gave her that look that said, "I'll explain later." Standing up, my friend and me made an excuse saying we had to leave and book it out of that house. Now the next few days, he didn't come over to sit with us, and Ryan seemed to be keeping his distance. For one moment, I thought, okay, he was going to leave me alone. But I was very wrong. As the weeks went on, every time I left class, Ryan was always standing by my locker. He knew my class schedule, and if he wasn't waiting at my locker, he was waiting near my classroom. I was freaking out that he wasn't normal. I had a feeling that he was stalking me. One day after school ended, I was walking up to the bus stop, and I noticed Ryan coming out. Luckily, he didn't see me. I ran behind the school building, noticing he was looking for me, but once he was on the bus, I was alone, waiting for mine. For months, the same thing happened. He would be by my locker and doing the same thing. I suffered that for 3 years, but things just got worse. One night it was cold and snowing. I was at home doing my homework when I heard the opening of my fence, and my dog was going crazy downstairs. Who would be at my house at night? Standing up, I walked to my bedroom window. I live in a 2-story home. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. As I looked out the window, my face grew pale. There was Ryan, standing in my yard, watching my window, and when our eyes connected, he just gave off that Joker grin. Shutting the blinds, it was only a few minutes when I heard a knock at my door. My parents were home as my mom walked downstairs answering the door. He said that he was a friend of mine and he was wanting to see me. My mother told him that it was late and he needed to go home, but apparently he walked from his house to my house, which is about 2 hours. Going downstairs, I stayed hidden, seeing that he had sandals on and a short-sleeved top. This was 50-degree weather, Why would anyone be in sandals and a summer top? Anyway, my mom and I had to give him a ride home, and we got into her Jeep. I knew he did this on purpose, just so he would be able to sit near me. After that night, I never thought things could get worse, but I was very wrong. It was summer vacation, school was out, and I worked for my family at their small business. And one day, I got a call from an unknown woman who apparently worked with Ryan. I asked, "How did you get this number?" She told me, "I work with Ryan. He talks about you all the time, and I took his phone when he was away looking through it. I wanted to warn you that he plans on kidnapping you and your car. He wants to take you out in the woods." When she said that, I was trying to process it. I couldn't believe it. He wanted to take me and do God knows what with me. After that, I got a restraining order to keep him away, but that didn't work. He continued to stalk me for 4 more years, even after I graduated. But all that changed one night when I was watching the news. He was arrested for raping his own sibling for 10 years span. Apparently, from what I heard while he was with his sister, he thought of me. Not only that, he also had various sexual harassment charges against him from other women, and they all looked like me. He's been in jail for a year now. I'm 26 years old, and to this day, I'm still terrified what will happen if he gets out. From 16 to 24 years old, I was stalked by Ryan. To this day, he still haunts me. Even now, I wonder, what was in that bus sitting in his yard? Thank God I never went near that bus. I would hate to know what was in there. When I was 11, my family of 6 decided to make the move from suburbia to a lovely rural bungalow. I have 3 sisters, aged 9, 12, and 18 at the time. We were all excited for the privacy and isolation of our new home. For once in our lives, we would have no neighbors and a large yard to play in. Our home had large picture windows, giving us a beautiful view of the farmland around us. My parents disliked curtains because there were no neighbors, and they collect dust, so we all figured, what's the point? That summer, there was so much fun. Every morning I would get up and take my dog for a walk around in the woods of our backyard. I absolutely adored the feeling of being alone and was enjoying the freedom of all our new space. Fall eventually rolled around, and I continued my routine of walking my dog, both in the morning and after school. I remember, one morning while walking my dog, I began feeling uncomfortable. I was alone in the woods. There was no one around, but I still felt as though I was being watched. I had shivers down my back the entire walk, and for an 11-year-old, I just felt really strange. My dog was acting weird too. I kept trying to go farther into the woods, but she kept trying to pull me towards our shed. The shed rested at the back of our yard, on the edge of the woods where the trees stand out quite a bit. I didn't like how I was feeling, so I picked up my dog and brought her back to the house and went on with my day. Days went by and I just couldn't seem to shake this feeling of being watched, especially when I was in my bedroom, which had a huge window in it that overlooked our backyard. The view of the woods that I had previously loved was beginning to scare me. I assumed it was just because it was fall and the forest started looking kind of gloomy. I started having nightmares about waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the figure of a man in our backyard. Weird things kept happening around our house. We all suddenly noticed that we were eating things like bread a lot quicker. Every morning, half a loaf of bread would be gone, and my parents attributed this to their hungry growing children. One evening, I woke up and I heard noises coming from our family kitchen, which was just down the hall from my bedroom. It sounded like someone had come home, and I assumed it was my oldest sister. The only thing that was strange was her footsteps sounded a lot heavier than they usually do. The noise stopped very quickly, and I was able to fall back asleep. In the morning, my mom asked me and my two sisters if we woke up late last night to make food. We all said no, and then I asked if it was my oldest sister. My mom told me that she stayed at her friend's house last night and that it was probably the dog making noise. I was terrified. I knew I heard unfamiliar footsteps. That night I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I still felt like someone was watching me. Eventually I had fallen asleep, but woke up around 2:30 a.m. I heard noises in that house again. It was the same footsteps I heard before. I stayed in my bed and I felt paralyzed. I rolled over and faced the window, hoping that if someone came in my room, they'd think I was asleep. The noises stopped and I closed my eyes as hard as I could. I told myself I was just imagining things and that monsters aren't real. About an hour must have gone by and I eventually opened my eyes. When I looked out the window, I swear to God I could see a man standing in our backyard watching our house. I was terrified enough that I didn't move at all, and I eventually fell asleep again. I was so relieved to wake up alive that morning, but I was still terrified of our backyard. I ran into the kitchen to tell my mom what I saw and refused to walk the dog. I'm not sure if she really believed me at the time or thought I was having a nightmare. I went to school that morning, and I was anxious all day. The last thing I wanted to do was go home. When I did, I saw police vehicles surrounding the house. They had the dogs with them and they were searching our yard. They told us a man who had broken into another house, had beaten the couple living there, was suspected of being on our property. He stole their wallets, photos, and other small items of value. The biggest thing he stole was their car, which he had ditched 10 kilometers from our home. While searching our property, they found all the items from his previous break-in hidden around our yard. They also discovered that he had been hiding in our shed since his previous break-in. They said he had done this at the previous home prior to breaking in. He would spend time watching the house and observing the residents' routine until he knew it well enough to start coming inside the house. They said he had a long history of premeditated violence, including child abuse, and believed he was planning on harming us. In the shed they found wrappers, empty cans of foods, and scraps. They told us he was definitely coming into our house for the food during the night. From the shed, he had a perfect view of our home and could see when we all went to bed. Although they searched our house and property with the dogs, they didn't find him. After that day, I realized that if you feel like you're being watched, you probably are.